I think that Tom's love for people is the most important quality that he has, and I think to be a Franciscan friar, that's something that you have to have.
I don't think anyone that I've met at this school exemplifies the Franciscan values as much as I think Tom does.
I know him, I knew him as a person a little bit better, and then hearing him talk about the reasons why, I said, okay, well, this kind of makes sense.
Growing up, I was raised Catholic. Especially when I was younger, we tried to go to Mass every Sunday, but as we got older and our schedules got busier, that became more difficult, and we stopped going to Mass as often. And to an extent, I sort of fell out of touch with my faith, and it wasn't really until coming to Siena that I really found that again through the Franciscans.
Since freshman year, he's very regularly gone to church, so it's not like right off the bat, he was starting at 0 and going up from there. Like, he always had some level of religious awakening, I guess. But over the last couple of years, you can just see how he's expanded through going to church and through interacting with the friars on a regular basis.
My first introduction to sort of the Franciscan charism was really through my uncle, Joe Sheehan, and a family friend through him, Father Kevin Mullen, who was a friar. He was always just kind of around as, a family friend that I would see at parties. I would talk to him a lot, but I never really had any in-depth conversations about what it meant to be a Franciscan. I just knew he was a priest. I remember the Christmas Eve of 2014, my mother getting a phone call and going up into her room, and she was in there for a while, but I didn't think much of anything of it. And a little while later, I was in my room, and she knocked on the door and came in. She had tears in her eyes, and she said, "Uncle Joe has cancer, and it's not good." At his wake and funeral, I just sort of met these people, and they all kind of had that same spirit that my uncle had and that Father Kevin Mullen has. And that's sort of right in the middle of when I was trying to make my college decision. So obviously, I ended up going to Siena, but I always kind of, I really don't have a lot of regrets, but I definitely regret that I never had the chance to really tell my uncle, hey, I'm going to Siena, because I know that was something he would have really loved to hear and know that.
I met Tom kind of early on in freshman year. He was in Psalm 150, so the church choir with us, and I kind of began to hang out with his group of friends. But I definitely remember seeing Tom like from day one. He was like the tall, friendly kid that wanted to meet everyone freshman orientation week. So I definitely have known him a long time.
Come on, Tom, go!
Very early on freshman year, I got involved with the Siena mentoring program, and every Saturday working with a group of kids from inner city Albany, really having that like family experience with all of them, and working very closely with Father Sean O'Brien. We spend every Saturday together, we've spent every summer together, and he's been a real close-up experience of being able to see what Franciscans are like, what they hold as important, and being able to just sort of pick his brain about what the Franciscan charism means to him, how he looks at the world, how he looks at the church, how he looks at people. So that's been a very valuable experience and resource to have.
Tom and I met when we were at an accepted students day at Siena when we were seniors in high school. And just in casual talks of getting to know each other and kind of talking about what we wanted to do with our lives later down the line, we talked about how we were both interested in possibly becoming teachers, possibly teachers at our high schools, and possibly basketball coaches at our high school, but at the same time, I could see and just from what he was talking about, his interest in religion and specifically in the Franciscan values. And just over the years, that's just continued to grow.
Well, in regards to my first meeting with Tom, I don't actually remember when it happened. It must have been at least his sophomore year. He's just such a prominent presence on campus. I'm pretty sure I first became aware of him through seeing the mentoring program and his involvement with that and Father Sean. So always such a bubbly, positive presence that he has, and then through his involvement with the Franciscan Center, I think got to know him a little bit better through that as well. And again, it's just his positive presence, so involved, so tall, very good presence about him. So I just thought, you know what, this is a good guy.
The more I learned about St. Francis, St. Clare, the spirit of the Franciscan tradition, the more I fell in love with it. There was really no point where I was like, ooh, I don't really know about that. Basically everything just sort of made sense to me. But even though it was something that became very important to me, it was a good couple of years before I really started thinking about going into the Franciscan order and possibly becoming a friar. That question started to come up, I'd say around my sophomore year here, like late in my sophomore year. And I just sort of like, you know, it was in the back of my head, I was sort of thinking about it. I looked into the process a little bit. And then as my years at Siena went on, the more I felt like it started to make sense. And I started to tell some of my close friends here, eventually told some of the friars.
When he told me at the beginning of last semester that he was thinking about joining the Friars, and he said it so confidently too, I knew that this was a great fit for him and that I was just over the moon happy for him.
I was surprised, but not for the reason of him making the decision that he's going to be a friar right out of college. I was more surprised just because it seemed that he was very interested in becoming a teacher. So that's what surprised me a little bit. But on the other hand, I wasn't too surprised because over the years, I had seen his interest in becoming a friar grow. So it kind of kept going up and up and up. And then when he told me, that was kind of when it reached its like climax. So before he even told me, I kind of could tell that's the direction it was moving.
I think it's sort of, in a way, a unique experience for me compared to some of my classmates and friends, but in other instances, kind of going through the same thing that they are. Because I mean, I don't necessarily have the same worries about, you know, grad school or like immediately finding a job right after college or anything like that. But at the same time, you know, we're all sort of trying to figure out what our vocation is. And you know, vocation isn't necessarily just like a strictly clerical religious term that has to do with becoming a priest or becoming a nun or something like that. It's really just what you are being called to do in your life. And that's what I think all of my friends are going through that too. They're trying to figure out what their future holds, what they're passionate about, what they feel like they're being called to do. And that's basically what I'm doing too.
I often think that it doesn't affect his day-to-day behavior as much as I would have assumed someone trying to enter religious life would be affected. I think Tom is just so focused on being a friend to everyone, and he has been since day one, that I really don't think things have changed much for him. He's still his friendly, energetic, funny self. He's still like the guy yelling at his intramural softball team on the sidelines, being the coach. Like, he's still just funny, awesome Tom.
O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
What I commend him for is that he's not afraid to ask questions. I think that's one of the most important elements of just collecting data, right? So any new thing we're going to embark on, any journey, any life decision that's significant, you ask questions. And what better thing to do than to ask questions of people who are a part of it already?
He's just Tom Schlink, like the Tom that students on this campus know and love.
It's definitely a different journey or path to take than a lot of other people our age. You know, not too many people of our generation are probably lining up to become Franciscan friars right out of college. That's really different, but also really good for him.
Even though, you know, you won't have those other things, you'll have all these opportunities to do, you know, a million other things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
I think it's funny the amount of students that find out, like, wait, Tom wants to be a friar? Like, people don't even know, and then when they find out, they're so happy and not surprised, but just like joyful about that decision.
I'm taking at least a year before I make any decision into starting the formation process. So I'm sort of looking forward to seeing, you know, at this point next year where I'm at in this process and if it is, you know, something that I still feel like I'm being called to do.